Welcome to Beth's Happy Home. It's beginning to look a lot like winter here, and so I'm thinking about making some really yummy dishes using beans. And beans are very highly nutritious, and there are some magical things about them that you may not know. You probably do know some of the magical things about them. But what I'm going to do today, what I've got set up is a comparison between some fairly fresh beans. I bought these a couple of months ago. So in terms of dry beans, these red beans are pretty fresh. I've been soaking all the beans for about 5 hours in just lukewarm water. And then I'm going to compare it with this beans from this bag that are 20 years old. And they have been stored improperly, I might add, in the original bag that they came in. Now, if I was going to use them in a matter of a couple of years, it would have been fine to just leave them in the bag and just use them out of the bag. But for lasting that long and keeping them that long, they should have been put into some oxygen-free plastic bucket or Mylar bags or something like that. But that's not what happened. And so I'm going to see if they're still good. Now, the first thing to look for in the dry beans, the old dry beans, is insect damage. And so as I looked at these beans, they look perfectly healthy. They're still shiny and glossy. There's absolutely no odor at all. There's no sign of any bug damage. They're not broken. And those are the things that you look for. Not breaking. Breaking doesn't indicate that they have deteriorated, but bug damage is visible. You can see that there starts to be a powder on them, or if there happened to be one that had spoiled, it would spoil the bag and it would stink, and you'd be able to tell. So your eyes and your nose are going to tell you if the beans have spoiled, but it's very rare that you're going to get spoilage. So this one has about 3 inches of water over the top of those soaked beans. I just used the hot tap water to refill the pot. Rinsed them a little bit before I started filling the pot too, to make sure that any dust or dirt or any little bits of rocks or anything that might have remained in there that I missed when I put them into the pot can have a chance to be rinsed away. So I'm going to do that with these ancient beans right here. All right, now the old beans are similarly treated. 3 inches of water above the beans, and they're well rinsed. So I know there's no dust, no dirt, nothing like that. Both of them smell fine, look fine. And now I'm going to start cooking them. Now you notice I'm not adding anything to the pot because I'm not going to add salt or anything else until after the beans are cooked. If you add a source of acid like tomato sauce or tomato juice or something like that to cook the beans in, if you're making chili, it can cause them to be tough, and it prevents the breakdown of that outer skin, and so you're going to have you might have a harder time getting them to soften. And so just cook the beans until they're tender, and then start seasoning them, flavoring them, add all your goodies to them. So we're going to do these both have the same pressure capability, so we're going to put them both on high and cook them for 30 minutes and see how that works. See if that's long enough. Just a word about these old beans. You might assume that because they're so old that they don't have any more nutritional value left in them, but that is actually not true. Beans are considered to be non-perishable, so they have an indefinite shelf life. Now that is not to say that there won't be some loss of vitamins as they age. There are certain vitamins that are subject to deterioration, and you are going to get some deterioration, I assume. And there were websites that said there's no deterioration, and there were websites that said, yeah, there's going to be some deterioration of the vitamins. But vitamins are compounds that can break down, whereas there are things like calcium and iron and zinc that are elements that are in beans, and they're not going anywhere. And the other good news is that the protein that is in beans is also going to last as long as the bean does. There's going to be good quality protein from beans if you can get them soft enough to eat, which you usually can if you have a pressure cooker. You're going to still have the benefit of the protein even from very, very old beans. So there's another factor about beans that you might find kind of interesting, and that is that if you pre-soak them, it actually increases the bioavailability of some of the nutrients, and it decreases some of the other nutrients, but it decreases them very slightly. And so I think overall you actually are going to, as a rule, benefit from soaking the beans in tepid water for about four or 5 hours before you cook them. That was my conclusion. So these are the nutrients that have a very slight loss if you pre-soak the beans. You have a slight loss of protein, zinc, riboflavin, and magnesium. Now you notice that zinc and magnesium are elements, and so where do they go? Well, they are actually rinsed out of the beans, and so you're going to lose them in the water. And the protein is probably a similar situation where some of that protein is going to leach into the water, and that's why it can be kind of thick for cooked beans. It gets thick. That's the protein that's been leached into the water. And you get some of that with soaking. You have a little more of a loss of the bioavailability of the iron, the niacin, and the potassium. Now notice those all three are elements, and so there again, you're probably just rinsing them out. The beans are releasing them into the water, you're rinsing them down the drain, but the difference is very, very small, less than 5%. And so the nutrients that are actually increased by soaking them are the carbohydrates are generally more bioavailable after soaking. The calcium is more bioavailable. The crude fiber is more bioavailable, more digestible, and the copper is increased by the soaking. And then you have a significant increase percentage-wise of the thiamine, and then the manganese is completely unaffected. It makes sense to me that because the iron is reduced, that the calcium would be increased, because it's hard for your body to absorb calcium and iron at the same time because the receptors are very close to each other, and so they tend to be mutually exclusive. So by reducing the amount of iron, you're going to increase the absorption of the calcium somewhat. That's a little bit of the way that your digestive system works. So by doing the soaking, the bottom line is you also are going to reduce the gassiness that is produced by the beans. And Jeff's giving me a thumbs up behind the camera, and I don't blame him. Another thing that you might find interesting are there are three different methods of soaking to reduce the gas if you want to break down that oligosaccharide layer that is in the beans. The first one is the one I mentioned earlier, is you soak them between 4 and 8 hours with a teaspoon of baking soda in the water, and that's to about 8 cups of water. So a half a teaspoon per quart of water that you soak the beans in, but then you rinse the beans after that before you go to cook them. So you rinse the baking soda off, and that will not only help soften the beans, but it will also help break down the oligosaccharides so that they won't be as gassy. Another way to get a similar result is to soak them for 4 hours in just plain lukewarm water. You don't want it hot. You don't want it any hotter than 122 degrees, because If you soak them in hot water, and a lot of places will recommend that you bring them up to a boil and then you let them soak, and that will speed up the soaking process so that they swell up faster, but it also destroys some of the nutrients in that process, and so you don't want to do that if you have plenty of time. If you're in a hurry, go ahead and do it, and the loss is pretty minimal, but you may as well maintain as many of the nutrients as you can. And then after you've soaked them in the lukewarm water, you're going to go ahead and pressure cook them, and the pressure cooking itself is going to help to break down those saccharides, the oligosaccharides. The last method is to soak them for 12 hours and change the water about every 3 hours, and then you cook them on the stovetop in plenty of water. Cover them with about 3 inches of water over the top of the soaked beans after they've been rinsed very well, and then just stop cooking them when they're tender. It'll probably take an hour to an hour and a half, maybe even a little bit longer, but it will work, and if you plan ahead, there's no reason not to use that method too. Okay, I cooked these each for 30 minutes, even though the suggested time is supposed to be for 45 minutes. But these beans that are the fresher of the 2 dry beans are completely tender, probably a little bit overcooked. Next time I'm going to cook them for 20 minutes and see if they have just a little firmer texture. The interesting thing was that these very old beans are just as tender as these are over here. The soaking seems to have made a difference. But these are actually overcooked after just 30 minutes in the pressure cooker on high. We'll have to wait and see if the gas production is better, but according to the scientists, they say it will be, so I guess we'll take their word for it. As far as cost goes, I'm comparing them also with canned beans. This is just regular kidney beans that have been canned in the can. And once they're drained, these are already cooked, and so they have their full water content. But you get 9.23 ounces in a can after they're drained. Of the 1 pound that costs twice as much dry, you get a yield of 5 times as much. So it's about 2.5 times cheaper to buy the dry beans in the 1 pound packages, and those that I cooked today came from Walmart. They were just like this package right here, Great Value red beans. And these beans that were in the 50-pound bag that I bought a long time ago, if I were to replace those now, they would be somewhat less expensive, but not dramatically less expensive than just buying them in the individual packages. So from what I could see online, it didn't look like there was a good way to save a lot of money by buying in bulk because the shipping was so expensive. So just go to the grocery store and buy the 1 pound packages, and you're going to be able to store those like you would if you were drawing from a 50-pound bag. And they will last a very long time and provide you with very good quality plant protein and lots of vitamins, minerals, and necessary nutrients that you need in your diet. So enjoy your musical fruit. Thanks for watching.